Okay, everyone, so without further ado, we're going to introduce our next and our first keynote speaker of the ceremonies, Tilda Shalof. Tilda has been a nurse for 33 years and is a national best-selling author. She has a wealth of knowledge in the field of nursing, ranging from ICU to camp nursing to home care. We're very lucky to have her here, as she's usually out traveling the world, teaching many nursing students throughout the course of her times. And Charlie, here we go.
So as Kyle said, we're very happy to have Tilda here today to share with us her wealth of knowledge and her vast experience. So let's give a warm welcome to Tilda Shalof. Welcome her to the stage. If you guys don't mind just listening to her and settle down just a little bit, just be quiet here.
Thank you very much. They say it was going to be chilly in Sault Ste. Marie. They warned me in the Sioux, very chilly in January, but I can't thank you enough for the amazingly warm welcome I've received. You've really taken me in, treated me like a rock star. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Today we're going to talk about all things nursing, which means that we're going to talk about everything. I'm sorry, I'm really distracted by all the noise. I'm sorry. I'm really trying. There's a lot of noise here, and I don't need silence, but I'm just very distracted by all the noise back there. Okay, I'll try to focus. As I say, going to talk about everything. There was once a TV show about nothing, but this is a TV show about everything, because to me, everything important in life I have learned from nursing. And everything wise and that I've learned from life I have used to make me a better nurse. And today, no questions or issues are going to be off limits. We're going to talk about anything you want to talk about. I have purposely staying till tomorrow, so I'm available if anyone wants to talk about any of the issues I'm going to be raising. We're going to talk about some controversial things: burnout, stress, compassion fatigue, all those things on your mind, night shift, being safe, handling your emotions, the NCLEX. I understand your concerns about that too. And I really, as I said, I'd love to talk to you personally about any of those things. A few years ago, there was a really popular book, many years ago, in the 70s, there was a very popular book that was groundbreaking at the time, and it has the title that makes me think of it today. How does that go there? Next slide, please, Sylvan. Maybe this one? Oh, there we go. Yes, so this was groundbreaking, if you can believe it. Don't look for it. It's very lame, a very tame book. But everything you always wanted to know about sex, and then the little asterisk down there, but we're afraid to ask. Well, it's going to be everything you wanted to know about nursing, but might be afraid to ask. That's what we're going to talk about today. So what's my claim to fame? How did I get the opportunity to stand up before you, nurses of Canada? Because you are, sooner than you believe, going to be a nurse, and you're going to be out there. You are the nurses of Canada, the nurses of not even the future, you're the nurses of today. Yes, it's true, I wrote some books, the most popular one being A Nurse's Story, became a bestseller. And yes, I'm a very experienced nurse. We call us well-seasoned, as you know. The spices, all those spices, the garlic, salt, peppers, and spicy things in there. I'm all those things, very, very seasoned. I put in a lot of hours. Thousands and thousands of patients have been in my care. I was thinking I probably have given 1 million capsules, tablets, IVs, injections. If you add it all up, it's probably over 1 million. And the thing is, that's not really my accomplishment, showing up all that time, just shift after shift after shift, days and nights. My accomplishment really is that for the most part, I stayed awake. And I paid attention, because it was also very precious to me, and it still is. I still work I still am a nurse, working at Toronto General Hospital in the Med-Surg ICU, because it's all very precious to me. I wanted to take it all in, not lose any of it, and I wrote a lot of it down. But yeah, I stayed awake for most of it. You know, not always. Sometimes I tuned out. Sometimes I closed myself off to the suffering. There was a lot of times that I couldn't stay awake to it all, but I really tried for the most of it to stay awake. Now, I probably should, before we really get started, I should warn you be upfront here that I'm not going to be presenting any theories today, and I hope that won't be a disappointment. There'll be no research findings, and no stats or literature reviews or anything like that. What I am offering instead are my opinions and my observations and my stories based on 33 years of experience. I would call it not evidence-based practice, but practice-based evidence. And I also want to tell you how it is that I have managed to stay in this profession all this time doing direct patient care and am happy and healthy about it, and also why I've stayed that long and why I still do what I do. Now, you want to know what nursing's all about, and I'm here to tell you that contrary to popular belief, it is possible to have a great and exciting career. When I say contrary to popular belief, I know you're being taught about burnout, that you're expected to be embittered and stressed out and discouraged. And I know the challenges are out there, and there are these things to be concerned about for sure. But it all is about the vision that you have as individuals and the choices that you make. But I congratulate you for having chosen nursing, and I'll be even happier if I meet up with you in a few years and you're just as energetic and idealistic as you are here today. And you can be. Look at me, I'm 56 and I still feel as excited about nursing as when I started, when I was your age and just starting out. And I do believe it is a fantastic time to be a nurse. That's the good news. I should warn you, they told us back then that it was a fantastic time to be a nurse. But I really believe that it is the good news. It is for a lot of reasons that I'll get into. Times are now ripe and ready for all that you have to offer. So how does one even choose to become a nurse? There wasn't much out there to tell me about it, and I don't think there's much there for you. A few TV shows, but we all know they're medical shows. They're about the doctors. You could easily be misled to believe that the healthcare system is about doctors and hospitals. After all, 90% of the healthcare budget goes to doctors and hospitals. But all the patient care in the hospital and all of it in the community is actually being done by nurses. All those things you see on TV are what nurses are doing. Doctors stop by and nurses stay, and that's the difference. And pop culture just has to come in line with the actual reality. And there's opportunities for that, I think, and we can talk about that too. TV, and they need to get on understand what the reality is. But I'm counting on you to let them know. But way back when I started like you, there was nothing. There was a series of books. I've shown this before, but I just can't resist. This series of books, really old when I was reading it in the 70s. They were so popular. If you find these in a used bookstore, they are vintage. Cruise nurse. I love the idea of being cruise nurse. Now, Cherry Ames was this beautiful, angelic nurse, and she did all these kind of exotic, glamorous gigs that she had. She was on a cruise. She was a dude ranch nurse, taking care of those injured cowboys. And then she worked as a camp nurse. I've done that one too. And department store nurse. And I wonder if at Walmart and Costco, if they have nurses. They really should have a nurse on duty there. So many, accidents and things, and paper cuts, and opening those plastic can be very injurious. Opening those plastic, but everything comes in plastic. It doesn't feel that long ago that I was exactly in your position. I graduated in 1983 from the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Toronto, and they told us we were going to be. Shout out to you guys, yeah. We were going to be assisting our patients on their journey of self-actualization and becoming. And we would be enhancing their wellness through the therapeutic use of ourselves. Nursing leaders, change agents, we were going to do it all. As for me, I just wanted to get out there. I wanted to start working. I wanted to earn a paycheck. I wanted to pass my exam, of course. I wanted to be just one of those nurses who could do it all, could start an IV on anyone, who could be the first one there to put the paddles down when the patient goes into cardiac arrest, and you be the one to say, stand back, and you would zap the patient. I wanted to be that nurse who, flick the bubbles out of the IV. And, it's very important. Don't worry, a few bubbles are fine. That's all I really was concerned about. I'm amazed that some of you here, just props to you that you even attend a conference like this, and some of you have even organized a conference like this. This bodes well for your career. You are going to be leaders and take charge of things. I wasn't there, I can tell you that. I remember the first day on staff, 6 patients, I had someone who needed a Foley catheter. I didn't even have time or take the moment to think why they needed a Foley catheter, why their urine output was low. I had to get that in. It was a skill I hadn't actually done on a real person. All these dressings to do, all these meds to give. It was bewildering and shocking. And all I really wanted was to get it through to the end of the shift and not kill anyone. I can tell you so far I haven't done that, haven't harmed anyone. Now, just also take in mind the way back then we didn't have computers or Facebook or internet or cell phones. We did it all like sort of a caveman kind of thing. I don't know how we managed, but we did. We seemed to give good care. But I worry anyone coming up here who's in their 50s talking to you, we must seem like a dinosaur to you. We worked back then without any of those things. But I want you to know we did have some technologies. We did have some tools. And when you graduated, that was what you always got, a watch. And these watches were always so cutesy for the girls graduating. And, this is exactly what the kind of thing you would get, these little things. It's actually, quite kitschy. Another one, similar, this one, I can't scare a nurse. That actually still is true. I don't think I could be scared by anything, and I don't think I'd be shocked. I've seen everything, and you will too. Now, this I find hilarious because I can't believe there are men who actually need a watch to tell them that they're men, but you know what? I'm sure they know. And anyway, it's nice for them, I suppose. This I couldn't resist. It's not really vintage, but it's hilarious. I find it. Of course, this is what you really need. When you graduate, you got a good pair of running shoes because, you're going to be running a lot. And none of this knowledge worker stuff. You were a body worker. You were running from room to room. You had all these patients, and there was a lot of stuff going on, and call bells ringing. And your generation's going to be the one to get rid of these call bells. You're going to figure out a way. Anyway, we didn't want the North Star people didn't want to imitate Adidas because that was 3 stripes, so they put 2 stripes. So it made it different than Adidas, but these were the thing to have, Anyway, stethoscope. Now here's the difference. We also learned physical assessment. Of course we did. We learned to use the stethoscope. Auscultation, of course. Heart, lungs, stomach, abdomen. However, we didn't have, most of us, I think, in practice in the early years, I think it's changed for those of us still practicing, would hear crackles to the bases, would hear diminished airway, but didn't know what to do with that information, didn't have the courage to share that information in rounds, didn't know how to take it to the next step. So that is really going to be the difference between the way you use the stethoscope and the way we did. For us, it was kind of more of a symbol, status symbol, but I think you're really going to use it in the way that it needs to be. Now, I left the best for last. Believe it or not, this is what every nurse had upon graduation. You came with at least one of these to work because you had to have the red for the heart rate, the black for the blood pressure, blue, respirations, temperature. And, you just couldn't nurse if you didn't have one of these. This was, essential. We made up the difference. Those of us who graduated from the university programs, I think your programs are much more attuned to the practical realities. I hope they are. They weren't then. I spent a few years with acutely ill patients on general medical floors, and the opportunity came up to study critical care. But make no mistake about it, patients on general medical floors, they are acutely ill and all verging on being critically ill. They all are on the edge because the way things are in our healthcare system, everyone's being moved along faster, and the ones who are stable are probably being discharged home. So the skills that you will learn in general medical is the best way to start, I think. It's your solid grounding for everything else that you'll do, general med surg. Anyway, I got into ICU. I've been there ever since. I've loved it. It's become home to me. I worked with people that are still my close friends and colleagues. We worked hard and we partied hardy too. We stayed out late, used to crawl in early the next morning. And even though the ICU was a very serious place, we still had a lot of fun. And when I look back on it, I think of all the fun that we had. I really wish that for you to have fun in your career. Very important. The ICU is still my home today, and where I have my family there, my ICU family. I'll tell you a secret. We baby boomers, we're in awe of you. I know there's this belief that we are so hard on you and we eat the young and this expression, but we admire you so much. We admire your energy and your openness and your openness to new ideas and inclusiveness, and your creativity and your ease with technology. We're so jealous. Your generation, and this is evidence-based, it's true, I looked this up, your generation is the most collaborative, connected, educated, and sophisticated generation in history. I read a research report on that, but I totally agree in terms of my own experience. That is exactly the way you are, collaborative, connected, educated. You don't represent the future, you are creating it already, and you are empowered and confident. And I meet young nurses all the time, and I work with them in the ICU, and that's exactly the way they are. They are less passive, they are questioning, they are not necessarily just blindly obedient. And these are very good traits, especially in a nurse. There's so much that you can do as a nurse, and you were learning about some of these things. There's just so many things that you can do. Your scope can be so narrow and specific and specialized and deep, or it can be as vast and wide as the universe. And I always remember a film I saw when I was a child. It's just 10 years old. The teacher came in with a little trolley cart with the projector on it. We watched this film from the National Film Board, 8-minute film called Cosmic Zoom. It starts with a boy on a boat in a lake, and he's just rowing the boat. And then the camera starts to zoom out, and you see the boy, and then you see the lake, and you see that he's in, actually, Ontario, because you can see the 5 Great Lakes. And then you can see he's in Canada, and you can see North America, and then the camera keeps zooming out until you see the whole ball of the Earth, the whole planet. And then the camera keeps zooming out until you see the moon, and you see the galaxies, and you see the planets, and you see the stars, and then whatever the artist's conception of infinity is. Then the camera stops, and you begin to zoom back down through the galaxies, through the constellations, through the planets, and the moon, and back to Earth, and back to the North America, and to Ontario, and to this lake, and to this boy on the lake. But then the camera stops again, and then it zooms onto the arm of the boy, and on the arm of the boy is a mosquito, and there's the mosquito as a stinger. And the stinger goes into the upper layer of the epidermis of the boy, and that goes into the capillaries, and this will go into the cells, and the cells go into the mitochondria, and into the nucleus, and into the protons, and all the very molecular, the smallest particles of life. And that is exactly what your life is like and what your career is like as a nurse. It can be as big or small, as vast, as wide, as you choose it, as you have courage to make it. Now, I want to teach you 2 new words that I think they'll be new for you. And they're 2 really crazy sounds. I've got a few crazy new words to teach you. Believe it or not, these are legit words. Bugaboos, bugbears, and bugaboos. So funny, because I love these words. They're actually the words that come to mind when I think of some of these concepts. You know, they are an imaginary fear out of proportion to their importance. Now, maybe when you're older, you realize that they're out of proportion with their importance. At your age, perhaps they seem huge. But take it from me, an older, sage, wise hag nurse, that some of these things, for example, and these concepts have been rattling around for years. You know, the whole thing about bullies. And I know they're out there. There's some very rude nurses. There's some nurses who are not generous with what they know. There are some nurses who will discount what you say, who will undermine you. Absolutely. They are few and far between in my experience, and I've traveled all around the world. The majority of nurses do want to help, do want to take you under their wing, do want to show you what you know. And all you have to do is show up with the attitude of, I want to learn. You have to identify who those good people are, who those good nurses are, and cleave to them. And ignore the others. Just walk on by. I think there's a sense in which if you expect it, it's going to happen. It's almost a guarantee. You know, I just don't buy it that nurses eat their young. It's just not like this jungle out there. It isn't. There are good people. There are good nurses out there. And I recently passed by, heard an older nurse kind of scolding a younger nurse, and I was kind of really poised to jump in, but I saw that the younger nurse was handling it just fine. The older nurse said something along the lines, I can't believe you didn't know that. Some little thing about crushing meds into the NG tube. And the student's reply made me smile. Has it been so long since you were a student? Have you forgotten what it's like? And I just thought, wow, that's it. So you stand up and you push back. Is it hard? Yes. Does it take courage? Yes. Can you do it? Absolutely. And you can do it with a buddy or you can do it by yourself. You just stand up for yourself. And even if it's scary, you do it anyway. So just seek out those good ones. And I do believe it's a bit of an imaginary fear that I think you'll find not nearly as bad. Although I have to say, I receive hundreds of emails from nurses who tell me these stories of these bullying or mistreatment, microaggressions, and I always contact them in email and back and forth, and we speak on the phone, how that could be handled differently. The whole thing is to prevent this from happening and to deal with it when it does. Have conversations with these nurses and talk to them. Really, these are the ways to solve these problems. Also, make the pledge that once you become experienced, and believe me, it doesn't take long, and I've seen it happen within a few months, that you become the one who feels superior. It's so easy to have it happen. You see it all the time. I'll teach you another word. Maybe you know this one. I love this another. I love words, but this one, brouhaha. This is a real word. This is legit. Not in the Urban Dictionary. This is in the old-fashioned dictionary. It's been around for a long time. Now, this is a controversy, an uproar, or a fuss that's inaccurate, overblown, or irrational. Nursing has a bit of this, I have to tell you. Take, for example, the proliferation of sexist imagery in nursing. Well, it's a lot better than it used to be. It's not nearly as bad. People are beginning to get it, okay, albeit there was this image. We saw this on the cover of Canadian Nurse, but the purpose of it was to bring it to our attention. It wasn't to say this is the way it should be. There was the thing on The View, Joy Behar, demeaning the role of the nurse and the stethoscope. These things are out there, but they are getting fewer and far between. And the point of it all is, rather than decry that they exist, rather than to say how wrong that is, spend more focus and time on bringing forth images to the media, to your own circle of friends and your community, the real positive, accurate images of what nursing, professional nursing is all about. That's where the focus should be. And again, it's a bit of a brouhaha. The focus on that, the focus is on creating new images. It's so easy to complain. Ballyhoo. What is ballyhoo? This is my favorite. It's a noisy, attention-getting commotion designed to incite people, get them alarmed and excited. I feel there's no reason to be alarmed or excited about anything, including NCLEX. And come and see me if you want to talk about that, because I can feel the anxiety about that here. And I know that all of you can face that exam. I know that all of you can prepare for it. Your curricula at the university and the schools of nursing is a lot more challenging. This is something you just have to learn, and we can talk about that. So one of the things of ballyhoo for me is like when we talk about knowledge workers. And we are knowledge workers, absolutely. We use a huge amount of knowledge and more all the time to give our care. But it gives a misleading idea that we are only knowledge workers, or that knowledge workers are better than body workers. And this schism in nursing has to go, because you see it all the time, even in palliative care. I was caring for a friend of mine who died at home, and I saw that the family had to call one number for the nurse to come in and deal with symptoms. She had to call another number for the personal support worker to come in and give the bath. And the system is so what's fragmented is our profession, that we feel that some things are beneath us. And I just hope you never feel that there's anything about nursing or anything about the human body that is beneath you. And I just think in our infatuation with technology and with credentialing, we just cannot allow this schism to take place, this dichotomy in what we believe is important. All of it's important about the human being. We cannot leave nursing to the internet. No, there's no app, there's no computer program or webpage policy manual that is going to solve the problems of our patients, or are going to meet their most basic needs. We know about how poverty is related to illness. We know how that so many people, over 7 million Canadians, suffer from mental illness. There's no app for that. We know that more people commit suicide and have mental illness than are even killed in war in Canada and around the world. We need to keep our nursing sensibility about this, which is a focus on the most important and basic things. And when even there's discussion about the rising costs in healthcare, why is it that way? Because people's basic needs have stayed the same. It's the cost of more technology and more drugs, and we have to also look critically at whether all those things are of benefit and how we spend the big bucks in healthcare and where it should go. As I said, 90% of healthcare dollars still goes to doctors and hospitals. I think you guys are going to change that. Now I want to tell you about a few of the zombie myths that are out there. These ones have been around since I was there, and these are scary, and you can't kill them. They do not die. They are the undead zombie myths. Again, burnout. To me I think you've been actually given a guarantee that you're going to be burned out. You know how many first-year students come to me and they quote a study that said 60%, have you read this study, 60% of new grads are burned out in their first year? How is that possible? It is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have been taught this is what's going to happen. It totally depends on you, your degree of self-care, your degree of awareness of this problem, the degree of awareness that you have of not shutting yourself out from all the suffering that you will see. And believe me, you're going to see some really gnarly things, horrific, sad, shocking things in the hospital. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to cope with that. Who are the people you can lean on? Who is your support system? The friends that you can, probably mostly nurse friends, that you can debrief with. Because when you tell your family, they start to worry about you. I write about this in the nurse's story. So when I walk in the door in the morning after my shift, my husband always says the same thing. He's sitting at the breakfast table, and he looks up and he says, "How was work?" And I just always say busy. I just, steady, busy, something like that, vague. He said yes, and we leave it at that. Now, should I tell him that someone died during the night, that I was there to help the family as this happened, that the wife sobbed in my arms and I held her? I'm not in any way blasé about that, but it is what I do for a living, and it's not something you can talk about with everyone, and you're going to have to find your ways of dealing with it, of processing it, and there are so many ways. I got a call from a young man who was concerned about his girlfriend, that one of her patients died. She's a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital. One of her patients died, and she was very upset about it. Well, I talked with him. He was very indignant that there was nowhere for her to go to deal with her feelings of being upset and being sad about her patient dying. That is so appropriate that she would be sad about her patient dying. The thing to do is to find ways to feel those feelings and to have the courage to feel those feelings. Well, of course, there are many resources, too, and I brainstormed with him about all the various resources. And there are more all the time that can help you deal with these problems. There is no reason for burnout. Burnout happens in every walk of life. Maybe it's more endemic to nursing because we do such intense work that's really personal work and intimate work, and caregiving is so demanding. As a nurse, you can't just phone it in. You are up close and personal with people, and their suffering you are witness to. Now, I say witness, but you do not have to suffer for it. You are not meant to suffer in this profession. Just because your patient is suffering doesn't mean, therefore, you must suffer. You must find a way to enjoy this profession, to witness what you witness, and to know that you can help. You can do so much to help. Nursing gives you these skills. When I'm asked, isn't your job depressing? Not in the least. It's very exciting to me that there's so much I can do to bring to the situation to make it better. Many young nurses, they come to me, they write to me, they contact me. I'm worried about how it will affect me emotionally. I take these problems home. I'm sensitive. I hope you feel these problems. I hope you feel many of the feelings, all the feelings that you feel, and that you'll find the courage to feel them. That you're sensitive. Well, the sensitivity that you have, don't lose that. That is what fuels me, what energizes me to keep on doing this work. I do care deeply about my patients, and it really keeps me going. It's my energy to do this work because I do deeply care. Again, it's to find the courage to feel these very difficult feelings. Now, I said what isn't a problem in nursing. Now I'm going to tell you what I think is a problem in nursing, and I'm going to narrow it down to 3. And I'm also depending on your generation to fix these. Now, the first and number one problem I think there is in nursing is the imbalance in gender. It is just crazy that in 2016, I still see a sea of women's faces in this profession. It's got to change. It's got to be inclusive. Men have to be attracted and welcomed to this profession. And I hear from guys all across the world who tell me that it still stigmatizes them to say that they're a nurse. They don't feel welcome with our feminized curriculum. And we, as a profession and as individuals, need to be in the presence of men and their way of thinking and their way of doing things, which is sometimes very different from the stereotypical way that women do things. And there are a lot of problems in our profession that I think would go away. And also our brand to the public would be so much more accurate if there were women. We have to find a way to attract more men to the profession and to keep them. And the whole imbalances of culture and class and race, all that has to be rectified as well. But the first and most glaring to me is the gender imbalance. And any and all of these things that I'm raising, I'm happy to talk with you about either in this forum or afterwards, privately or in a group. I'm around. Recently, so then to finish with that problem, the second big problem is our confusion about our professional identity. And I alluded to this earlier when I talked about the knowledge workers. I think that we have to figure out if we're white collar or blue collar, but what I think we really are is both. I think we transcend class, and I think we need to get beyond that. Are we union? Are we management? Are we professionals? Are we workers? I think that it's impossible. I'm an example of this, of being able to encompass it all. It is possible. You can have the concerns of the union, and rightly you should, about workplace equity and about your rights and benefits and all these things that the union fights so hard for us. And safety, our safety is very important. It's crucial. On the other hand, you can also have the concerns of, there doesn't have to be the adversity, this adversarial relationship that we have built up. And to divide us between knowledge workers and body workers, I think is a really big mistake to go. And if you decide to bypass the body work, if you decide to jump right into research or management, and it's possible that some of you here may do that, I believe that you will miss out on some very important and meaningful and satisfying experiences. If you're worried about getting your hands dirty, well, then I guess it's possible. Don't touch me if you I have touched everything. I did struggle with this, and I'll get to that in a minute. I did struggle with it in the early days of my career, but I am definitely jiggy with it now. Yeah, so I really feel that you will have to know those experiences if you do want to rise up in the corporation of the hospital today, the healthcare system. You'll have to know the work at its core, which is patient care. I was in the elevator once with the CEO of the hospital, Dr. Bob Bell. He's now in the Ministry of Health in Ontario. A very dignified guy. He's in a suit, well dressed, and I'm in my scrubs, stained with all kinds of suspicious-looking things. And, he makes 10 times what I make. He's got, huge responsibilities. 4 hospitals are conglomerated into one consortium. And I have my 1 or 2 patients in the ICU that I'm taking care of. But you know what, patients, who do you want? Do you want Bob Bell or do you want me? And I value that so much that I am necessary to those patients, and I'm the one who makes that difference and makes their lives better. I'm the one who relieves their pain. I'm the one who teaches them. I'm the one that they need. Who are you going to call? Remember that? The Ghostbusters. This whole division, the RNs holding themselves above the RPNs, the RNs, the NPs over the RNs, it's all got to go. We cannot take up our places in the interprofessional team if we don't have our own house in order and know what we do and know our worth. Now, the third problem I identify is an ongoing problem. We have to get better at telling our stories and defining ourselves in more ways than just saying that we're compassionate. I saw this piece of jewelry. I just love this. Look at, I can't stand this. This is the kindness. The nurse is patient. The nurse is caring. The nurse is gentle. This is all true. These are all true. Cheerful, I don't know if I can always say being cheerful. That one, I don't know. I try, but some things really. So I just think this is not what defines us. In the past it was, sure. But they're not going to pay us the big bucks if that's all we are. Bring in your mothers and your friends and do that. This is the kind of thing that everyone who approaches the patient should be like this, kind and gentle and all that. This is more accurate, I think, confident and happy and creative and fierce in our advocacy for patients. And advocacy isn't just, sitting and talking to them and explaining things, although technically that is advocacy too. Counseling is advocacy. Teaching is advocacy. Advocacy is also standing up when something is wrong and speaking out and doing what's right, even when what's right is difficult. So I think I wouldn't buy this jewelry anyway, even if it was like that, but this seems to me a little more accurate. So explaining what we do is what I really set out to do, and I really believe in this. And I hope my book, A Nurse's Story, has helped you to tell your story. I hope it's opened a lot of avenues. We know that there are so many ways to tell a story. It doesn't just have to be an old-fashioned old book, although a book is a good format for a long piece of work. But there are many ways to get your stories out there, and we can talk about these too. But that phrase, no one knows what we do, that came up a lot a few years ago. About 12 years ago, the SARS crisis happened. I'll tell you about that in a minute. That was a really scary time. It was a massive global pandemic, even worse than Ebola. I'll tell you about that in a moment. That was very scary, and nursing was suddenly on the radar because who was caring for those patients? The hospitals cleared out, but the frontline workers, they called us. Who are the frontline workers? We are the frontline workers. We were the ones who continued to give patient care and to go there, and it was scary. But anyway, I digress because really what I want to tell you is that nursing got on the radar of the public's attention. And it was at that time that there was an opportunity, and I got this book published because this phrase, no one knows what we do. And when I brought this book to the publisher, that's exactly what he said. I've never heard these stories before. This perspective has never been shown before. So I knew that who better to tell people what really goes on in the hospital than a nurse. And I knew that most of these stories had never been told before. And in fact, I hear from people all around the world, in French readers, and Chinese readers, and Vietnamese, and Japanese readers, all over the world. And, everyone says, nurses are a very respected profession, and I believe we are. But people don't really know what we do. A patient was telling me that she was cared for in an emergency department, that a nurse was there, and there was a suspicion that she had a heart attack with the patient. And the nurse held her hand, she said, was so sweet, so angelic, held my hand. Well, I'll tell you something, that nurse also drew troponin levels, made sure that they were normalized, made sure the electrolytes were normalized, gave her pain medication, gave her oxygen, managed her other symptoms, watched the cardiac monitor, and made sure there was no arrhythmias, and if there were, sprung into action. There are so many things that we do that we need to articulate this and explain this to people because people do want to know what we do. They find it very comforting when we share our knowledge. Another thing happened not too long ago, and then when I was shift in the ICU, I was standing there talking with a family member with the doctor. The doctor and I were standing side by side and giving information about the patient, who was a father of this woman. And she was the daughter, and the patient was 2 days post-op liver transplant, very unstable with enzymes and electrolytes, and something happened that occasionally does happen after a liver transplant. Patient had a grand mal seizure right there, and the daughter was, of course, horrified, and I was right there, so I did what all of you will do one day, and probably many of you already know to do. I turned up the oxygen, I called for the RT, I called for some Ativan or some a benzodiazepine like Valium or Ativan that will help break the seizure. I padded up the bed all the time, talking to the wife, explaining the daughter, explaining what I was doing, and watching the monitor, made sure the alarms were on, called for a stat EEG to do brain study, encephalogram. And when all this settled down, this took place over quite a few minutes, and all this settled down, the seizure abated, and then I heard the daughter telling her mother on the phone, "Dad had a seizure, Mom. Thank God the doctor was here." Now, I chuckled, we hear this, and the public still has to get it, and there are going to be some people don't get it. But what's different about this story is what the doctor said. He said, "No, it was your nurse. Your nurse did everything. Your nurse saved him." And I think there is a sea change. I'm feeling it, and I've been in it long enough to be able to tell you people are beginning to get it. And but that's a positive sign. I think you'll see more of that. Now, everyone always asks me for advice, and I'm not a big advice giver because advice presumes I know better than you. I can only tell you what's helped me over the years, and I'm going to give you my top 13 pieces. I call it, wow, my words of wisdom. 13, and why 13? I could have given you 18. I could have given you an endless number, really, of things I want to share with you. But 13, it's traditionally the number of fear. It's triskaidekaphobia is the fear of the number 13. And, I just want to really confront these fears that we have. And I mentioned some of them, and there may be others that you have, and I want to help you pick them apart and unpack them and figure them out, because all of life is about conquering your fears. And you'll have many opportunities in nursing. Now, there is a fear right now, and I hear it all the time. This is, my brave nursing commandment, number 13. We're going to do a countdown like on SNL. Now, there's this fear that there are no jobs out there, and there are jobs out there. I see jobs being advertised all the time. That may not be exactly the job that you want, but believe me, in time you will figure out what you want. And it also doesn't mean you're captive to have to take whatever job comes along. You have to give some thought to it and the kind of environment you want to work in. It's not just don't just define yourselves at this stage of your career by an organ system, like you're a cardiac nurse or you're a nephrology nurse. That may come later. And when it does, make sure you get certified. I was talking yesterday with the CNA representative from the certification, director of certification at CNA, Patricia Miller, and the importance of even thinking now about certification. Did I think about this at your stage? No, not at all. But when I found that I loved critical care, and I found that that's where I wanted to be, that's when I started studying for the exam. And I was one of the first people to write that exam. It's like 25 years ago. And I recently rewrote it by exam because I want to make sure I can stay in the game. And I have to have this knowledge if I'm going to continue to care for critically ill patients. So it's a wonderful experience. But that will come in time. I would be surprised if any of you were certain about the career choice that you wanted to have right now. Don't cling to any certain idea. I'm not that kind of person, or I'm not this kind of nurse. The attitude is all that's important, your attitude, your openness to this. Consider what kind of problems you want to solve. And ultimately, as I say, in this clip here, this little, date your job. You don't have to marry it, and you can also divorce it. You can leave it and try something else. Sometimes that process of trying different things in the first few years, I speak to young nurses all the time who do this and try different things, and they feel like, they haven't found the right thing. That's the process you have to go through to find the right things. Okay, let's move on now. The top 12th commandment. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I know you've got a lot of other things to cover today, but the top number 12 is I really believe that if you create something, you're going to feel a lot better about the problem rather than criticize, and you discuss it rather than just simply diss. And there's a lot of complaint in nursing. You're going to see when you come to certain wards, and it varies depending on the culture where you work. But this culture of complaining about your education didn't adequately prepare you. I felt that very much. I hope you don't feel that way. But Sometimes we're complaining about situations that it's not even the working conditions, that there's no one to blame. It's simply that the work is hard. But if you are able to identify the problems and go ahead and complain a little bit, it really feels good to complain. But then move into solutions, finding solutions. If there are roadblocks and obstacles, get together and strategize with one another. Work with your union, of course, and work also with management. If you see a sign like this, well, why not? Why shouldn't you enter that? You go ahead. I give you permission, unless it's dangerous, but mostly it's just, you'll hear this phrase, we're not allowed to do that. We can't do that. Well, why not? Who says? Challenge that. We need to expand to work to the full extent of our scope of practice, and many nurses still are not doing that, but you can lead the way in that. Take something like palliative care. We all know how important that is and how it's the end of people's lives and their families, and how it's growing in people's understanding of the need for it in this country. There is such an opportunity for nurses to get together and create this, and I'm talking about business, and I'm talking about within the healthcare system as well that's not for business. But we can talk about this individually because it may not be all for all of you. But this is the time, if you have any interest in being a nurse entrepreneur, this is the time. There is a real demand for our services and our knowledge. What about a Dragon's Day event just for nursing inventions? Come on, let's bring that. You can co-create something with your patients. Come up with nursing hacks, better way to do things, and opportunities where you decide how things should be done. And as I say, you're going to be the generation to put an end to call bells. What about nurse coding? How many of you, if you learn to code and combine that with your nursing knowledge, how cool would that be? All the apps you could create and the websites that you could create, all the informatics systems, if you could do the coding rather than we have to always call in someone, the IT person who can code for us. Start with thecodeacademy.com. It's amazing how you can learn it step by step, and I'm sure some of you would really get into it. We all know how the publishing industry, the music industry, and of course healthcare is being totally transformed in the last few years. What about nursing? Is nursing changing as fast? Is nursing keeping up with the times? This concerns me at times. The world is changing so fast. Now, the other thing is that we talked about fear, and I'm going to bring it up again. This is my commandment number 11. Know what is making you afraid. Know what it is. Life, as I say, is about conquering these fears. I love Ronda Rousey. Now, she's great mixed martial arts champion, and this is what she says. She says people think she doesn't have fear. Well, I'm sorry if it's small. People say to me all the time, you have no fear. I tell them, no, that's not true. I'm scared all the time, but you have to have fear in order to have courage. I'm a courageous person because I'm scared. I'm a scared person. And really and I was talking earlier about SARS. I mentioned this. This was such a scary time. This was very scary when we all felt that just going to work was endangering our health and what we were bringing home to our families. And in fact, nurses speaking up about signs of a second wave of this pandemic were ignored. And then a second wave came in, and they just didn't speak up loud enough, or a combination of that, and people didn't listen to them. It was a very scary time. It was even more scary than Ebola, to be honest, because it's airborne. It was airborne, not contact. So, I wrote a nurse's story, and everyone just said, oh, that's so dangerous. And I really needed some courage to see that one through. It was tachypnic, diaphoretic, tachycardic, all the signs of fear when I was writing it and when I brought it to light. Because I wrote about some dangerous things, some taboos about patients I didn't like, patients who didn't like me. Just the times when I didn't have it, I wasn't gelling with my patient and just losing my empathy, and you just can't bring it every single day. I wrote about dying in the hospital. It happens a lot in the hospital, and how sometimes there's so many conflicts and that take place right over the patient's bedside, families warring and the team members pulling in different directions. I wrote about errors, medical errors, and I started with my own, the times that I've screwed up, and thank God none of them have caused any harm, but I've made my share of them. I wrote a lot about night shift, because unfortunately that's the reality of hospital nursing, that we do provide nursing care 24/7, and it is a real burden, and it's hard on you, and we have to find ways, and there are ways that we can talk about to make that burden harder. And I talked about another dirty little secret, poo, and I don't want nurses to continue to look at their profession through poo-colored glasses. I love that expression. I wanted to talk about how you get to the point where you feel dignified and after all, you want to help the patient to feel dignified. How do you help the patient to feel dignified when you yourself feel demeaned by this work? And it's a process of coming to terms with it, and I try to explain that, how I came to terms with it in a nurse's story. But all these things were scary to write about and to talk about publicly. Now, there was no time in my personal life that I've ever been more scared, personally, than when I was told by a cardiologist a few years ago that I had to have open heart surgery. Now, I was terrified, of course, as a nurse can only be. I knew that I had a congenital anomaly. I had a bicuspid aortic valve, and as you know, the aortic valve is a tricuspid valve. And over the years, it became stenotic. I had lived a normal life up until the age of 49, but then I needed this surgery. And I don't know how most people, ordinary muggles out there, they think about heart surgery, open heart surgery. But I'm telling you, this is how a nurse thinks about it. Oh, sorry, get that out of the way. A nurse thinks about it like this. We see it, we can hear the saw going through the chest wall and, the sternum and cracking open the sternum and the cardioplegia to stop the heart. And we know what it involves. And that's what was going through my mind. And now that you're a nurse, you're going to be in this club too, that you can see things. There's always, nurses know what to worry about. Well, the surgeon assured me, there's a 98% success rate with this surgery. There's not going to be any problems. You have no comorbidities. What are you so worried about? Well, I'll tell you, my short list was cardioplegia, medial sternotomy, intubation, nosocomial infections, iatrogenic problems, complications, general medical error, I had a few things on my short list. But then I realized what my biggest fear was. My biggest fear was nurses. Nurses were going to be the one to save me or not and drop the ball. Nurses are going to be the one to speak up if there was a problem, and in fact, there was a problem. I lost a lot of blood post-operatively, and I needed a transfusion. Nurses are going to be the one to see that and to act on it, not look away, because a timid nurse is not the nurse you want. That's not the nurse that's going to keep you safe. It's the confident nurse who's willing to speak up, and even if not sure if he or she is right, is willing to do that on behalf of the patient. Nurses can sometimes be the weakest link. Sometimes there aren't enough of us. And this is what scared me the most. But I was lucky enough to have amazing nursing care, and I wrote about it in Opening My Heart. And then I had, after the surgery, and my doctor said, you really need to go to cardiac rehab. Everyone, it just struck me as being so like old people with on the bikes, the treadmill, whatever, and the electrodes. And I just didn't want to have any part of it. So I thought I'll get a personal trainer. It's a great thing to have. I thought, why not do that? Just do my own cardiac rehab. So I just wanted to show you a picture of my personal trainer. And that's Toby, my dog. I just thought I'd throw that in there for you. Now, let's go on now. Serious information here. Commandment number 10. You probably have heard this, but what does it mean to fail for a nurse? Here's the recipe for success. You fail, you get up, you try again, repeat. If we fail at things, there's a big consequences. The stakes are pretty high, and I talked about medical errors, but I'm not even talking about that. That for sure. You have to be safe when you're doing things. You have to ask a lot of questions. Even if you become a pest, asking many, many questions. Who cares? Just don't do anything until you feel you're competent and safe. But recently, a young man asked me, a nursing student, and he struck me as such a go-getter and confident guy, and he was a question and answer period, and he said, what do you do if you're going to take the vital signs of a patient and the patient's sleeping? Well, it's actually an interesting question because it brings to mind all the things that could be on his mind. Well, first of all, you have to give a medication, and it's dependent on knowing his blood pressure, like an antihypertensive or an antiarrhythmic, and what was his blood pressure before, is he stable? There's a lot of things that will go into your decision whether or not to wake that patient up. But I saw that what was at the bottom of his question was fear. He was afraid of doing something and feeling foolish. So if some nurse, he would wake up the patient, take the blood pressure, and the patient would be angry. And then the nurse would come along and say, the old nurse, oh, what'd you wake him up for? He's stable. And then, of course, he could not wake up the patient and then, defer that to later. And some nurse would come along and say, why didn't you wake up your patient? You know it's time for vital signs. Sometimes you can't win, And this is the thing you have to be willing to be resilient and go through until you really can be confident of your own judgment in this. You can think of anyone who you think is successful, any politician, any artist, any celebrity, they all will tell you about their period of failing at something and trying something and it didn't work. My kids said, why don't you talk about Michael Jordan? Well, who's Michael Jordan? I kind of knew who he was. But, they told me, and then I looked it up, he has missed more than 12,000 shots. He said, I've lost almost 200, 300 games, 26 times. I have been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and I missed. I failed over and over again, and that is why I succeed. Okay, now in the lines of thinking about Michael Jordan, I started to think of who were my leaders. There's this old cartoon called, I forget what it was called, but this was the phrase, take me to your leader. It was very funny. And who are the people that you hold in great esteem? Keep those people in mind. They will help you through these difficult times. People who have maybe overcome something a great obstacle, who have stood up for what's right, even when what is right is difficult. And I have my own list, but you make yours and keep it in your mind. For me, Barack Obama is an example of moral fortitude and strength and pursuit of justice. Nelson Mandela, for so many reasons. Oprah, don't think I'm just a honky with the white, the white people too that I admire. Diana and I took, there are many beautiful pictures of Diana. This isn't a particularly beautiful picture of her, but what is extraordinary about this was the first time that someone in the public eye shook the hand of an AIDS patient. So it was taken in Toronto at Casey House. Now, there aren't many AIDS patients at all. HIV is so well controlled, it's a chronic illness, but then all the patients were dying, and I cared for so many of them, and we were all so afraid to touch them or come near them. Princess Diana came to Casey House in the 80s, I don't remember what year, 83 or something, and she shook this patient's hand, and that made such a difference in the whole approach that the people had, nurses especially, to caring for our patients. We realized, of course, you're not going to get HIV from handshakes. And this one, you may not know Gloria Steinem. She was a leader of the feminists, but was the first person that I know of to use the word feminist and to argue and to fight for equal rights for everyone, not just women, but for everyone. So moving on now, this is an important question here. Are we paid enough? Now, this isn't really a commandment, but I did want to bring it up here. Are we paid enough? Now, you will be astonished, as I was, when you go to work at your first job and you will actually get a paycheck. It's so exciting. Listen, all this work that you're doing now and you're getting tested on, you're going to be paid for. It's incredible. Now, I have to tell you, you should have an automatic deduction into your pay. I really believe in that. Did I do that when I was your age? No. Had I been told to do it, as I'm telling you now, probably not. I wish I had. I've started doing it now, but start now. You will be amazed at compound interest, how that grows. But I'm not here to teach you about finances, so you could tell me a thing or two, I'm sure. But this question, are we paid enough? Well, you're going to have to decide. I think that what we're going to be paid is commensurate with what the public sees as our value. And the way they're going to understand our value is by getting our research findings out, showing that the ratio of nurses to patients when it's high as possible, that the reduction in infections and improvement in mortality rates and all these things. When people meet incredible nurses like you're going to be, and then they will understand. Yes, I do think we are paid well, but if you've chosen nursing because it seems like a stable job with a decent income and job security and benefits and all that, you are right. But if this is your motivator, I think it's not going to sustain your career. It's not going to keep you strong throughout it all. Once I stood next to a nurse, she was cleaning vomit out of a patient's mouth, a homeless patient, and it was a hard scene to be there. We were all gagging and wearing masks. It was a patient that had scabies and all kinds of bugs. And she was cleaning vomit out of his mouth, and she said, you know what, they can't pay us enough for some of the things we do. And I think she said it kind of, in a down moment, they can't pay us enough. But this is not something that you can put a dollar value on. If you're in nursing for the money, you will not be satisfied. But there are opportunities to make money in terms of being an entrepreneur. Again, we can speak about this privately. But so really, you're going to have to find more than the monetary reward for this profession, and I really put this in this. This is my new acronym I've made up. I hope it's going to replace LOL and all the others. New thing I made up. What's in it for me? And I think you're going to have to really revisit that question throughout your career, especially if there are times when you feel burnt out or down or just discouraged by all that you're seeing. What's in it for me? Why you are doing this work? You have to stay close to this reason, because really there are easier ways to make a living. You have to. I talked about money, now I'm talking about love. I'm talking about a reason to be doing this profession. You have so much to give this profession, but you have to be aware of what you're getting back as well. What is the profession going to do for you? Yes, money, but there has to be more for it than that. See, we as nurses have something that everyone wants, and this is another acronym I've made up, work that matters. And this phrase, we make a difference. Of course we make a difference, but we actually do more than that. We make things better. And sometimes nursing care makes all the difference in the world, but we actually make things better. So work that matters, everyone says that, bless you, everyone says that that's what they want, and we have it. Now, another one of the six, let's move along here. I know you've got to put in your time. So many people want to jump to the next step. I get so many letters from people. They want to go right to the ICU, right to these specialty areas. If you feel ready for that, by all means, but I don't know how you possibly could. Again, I turn to Rhonda Rousey. She says, I have worked my ass off to be able to have a high opinion of myself. You have to put, we have to put the time in to do this. And, take it from Flava Flav. He says, you can't feed the baby steak. And you cannot rush right to the higher protein levels until you've learned the basics. You can't. I mean, maybe there are some of you who can. If you find a good mentor and work closely with that mentor, there are a lot of things that have to be in place. But I would not recommend it. I really think it's I met a young nurse at the CNCC conference a few years ago, and she said, I wish I knew it all now. I understand your patience. But really, in the beginning, it's on a need-to-know basis. You'll go and proceed and learn all that you need to learn in the workplace on a need-to-know basis. But really, you need to put your time in. And once you do, again, revisit the recertification options that I've told you about. Very important. You've got to work at your skills. And if you do, you're going to see progress with your time management, with prioritizing patient care, your physical assessment, everything. Stress. Oh, and in this, I had to work so hard to be able to deal with that. That was my last patient in the ICU. I realized that a few weeks ago, I spent more time taking care of all this machinery. But, it took me years to figure all that out, to know how, the cardiac monitor, the dialysis machine, the ventilator, and on the other side of the room is the ECMO machine, the extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine that does all the oxygen and carbon dioxide oxygen exchanges outside of the body. It's incredible. And we, the nurses in the ICU, are managing patients on that. So again, I ask the question, is it stressful, or is it, do we get stressed? It's hard to say that those situations that I've described are stressful to me, because I'm very experienced. I know what I'm doing, and you will be too. So we have to look at what is our reaction to these things. Nursing is not inherently stressful. It is very demanding. You have to learn to manage your stress. And this is an ongoing work in progress. You'll be learning for many years. Some people take to it more naturally than others. But an average day in a nurse's life, if you ask about what goes on, there's some pretty high-profile things. Sometimes many things that you do, if you do them right, the patient will get better, and if you don't, if you miss something, then there will be serious consequences. So you could say that's stress, but if you know what you're doing and you're competent, it's exhilarating. It's exciting. It's very job satisfying. So you are well on your way with all of that. Now, along with this, you must make this stress, and this is what I think should research. Talk about research. This, in my manager's office, she's got this bowl of candy. I swear to you, when there's more stress in the ICU, there's a buzz in the ICU, the stress levels go up, the candy level goes down. So I think there's an indirect relationship here, a correlation here. So I'm not claiming causation, but I do think, and I think there's a research study for someone. So anyway, on to the next thing. This has to be in place. You can be the Zen nurse. It's a process. You work on it. You find things that really help you and to manage your stress. And, everyone has stress, but nurses have more than most. And we have to have an ultra commitment to this. And not just for narcissistic reasons to feel good, but in order that we can do this work and avoid that dreaded burnout. It's simply the nature of our work. We are exposed to so much. And I went through my own period of personal, I would say mental illness, of depression, and I was homeless for a period. I wrote about it in The Making of a Nurse. Just think of trying to be a nurse, and if we know that 7 million Canadians have mental illness, well, why would nurses be exempt from that? We're all struggling with different things, and yet we have to be there for our patients. It's very hard at times. But there are resources, and the main thing is to take care of yourself. Sleep, exercise, eating well, actively pursuing stress reduction techniques, yoga, creative hobbies are so important. And did I do these things at your age? No. But I do now, but I'm advising you, start now to make self-care an essential part of your nursing practice. So, the third one is it's a big one, but I'm really not going to spend much time on. Wake up and see all the potential in this profession. When you're nurses, when you become a nurse, your world becomes larger. You can't just read the newspaper and or hear the news and say, oh yeah, there's problems over there, there's poverty, there's drought, there's famine, there's a hurricane, there's crime. All of these things affect people's health, and you as a nurse know. And you can position yourself anywhere in that spectrum that I talked about in the universe of being of help in helping that problem. Being of use in helping that problem. You know how all these things have a direct effect on people's health and safety. And your work can be very central, very specialized on the molecules that I talked about, or it can be as big as global nursing. And I know you're going to hear about that a little later. Fascinating topic. Nursing is a way to actually make a better world, to do something about the world suffering. Now, here's my my penultimate advice here. You know, humor is so important. Every time you find some humor in a difficult situation, you are the winner. You know, when I look back on all my years of nursing, one of the main things that comes out for me is all the fun I had. You have to be, I want you to enjoy your work. You are not meant to suffer in this profession. Are you laughing? Are you smiling? Do you ultimately, maybe not in the beginning, but look forward to going to work and work with people? Now I'm going to cue up the music here. Sylvan, the music. Have fun. Should be longer, but you know what? I have danced at work. I have danced around the nursing station with my friends. At night shift, turned up the tunes. Did it wake up patients? Well, maybe it did. You know, what is that party going on at the nursing station? Well, you know, crank. Anyway, you've got to have fun at work, as I say, and it's very important. And the next thing I'm going to leave you with is I really want you to tell your story, to speak out, to get loud. Let's go with the next clip.
Here we go. Let's get loud. Let's get loud. Turn the music up. Let's do it. Come on, people. Let's get loud. Let's get loud. Turn the music up to hear that sound. Let's get loud. Let's get loud. Ain't nobody gotta tell
Make sure you speak up and be proud to be a nurse and share what you know with everyone on the team. And yeah, let's hear it again. No problem. When you graduate, you are going to be able to do so much, but you have to be present and be there and show up and speak up. It's been such a joy to be with you today. I hope I will read and hear all about your stories in the years to come. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, before Tilda goes, we would like to present her with her gift for